Hey everyone, I'm really honored that I could just spend a week 2 of our Made for More with each and every one of you. If we have not met, my name is Aaron Sturgis. I'm the pastor here at Central Lutheran, and I have the honor of being able to serve here. And if you're here from Bethel Lutheran, or if you're here watching online, I want to welcome you to being a part of this. I don't take for granted that we get to spend this time together. I wanted to start off our time together by sharing with you one of the scariest moments of my life, or maybe scariest evenings, I should say, of my life. My family and I, we were just outside of Loveland, Colorado. We had made it up to Loveland Pass, and now it was time to find a place to sleep. It was our second to the last night of our 3.5-week trip that we were taking in our van. Our family was touring the western states, and we were on our way home. I remember the sun was slipping behind the peaks as our van wound its way through the mountain roads. My goal that night was to find the most perfect place to what's called boondock it one last time. I had visions of snow-covered peaks, beautiful pines, and moonlit mountains. We were on the hunt for that perfect campsite. You know, one with a view of the valley and the little trickling stream nearby. I was at the wheel of our van, Sprinter van. I was brimming with confidence. My wife sat in the passenger seat scrolling through the map on her phone, while the kids in the back seat kept asking the same question every 5 minutes. Dad, are we there yet? That's when I spotted a road I knew was the right road. A sharp turn, a narrow climb. It had scenic shortcut written all over it. I grinned, I turned, and off we went. Well, the pavement gave way to gravel. Gravel turned into dirt. Dirt turned into something that barely counted as a road. And after an hour or so of this driving, my wife shot me that look. The one that says, this better not be what I think it is. The kids, of course, they loved it. To them, we were off-roading in a Sprinter van that wasn't meant to be off-road. Our van rattled and bumped like a roller coaster. But as the road climbed higher, the forest grew thicker and the shadows deeper. There was not a light or a house or humans anywhere. The scenic shortcut that I took turned into a one-way ticket to nowhere. My GPS gave up, spinning its little blue dot in circles like it was just laughing at me. Finally, the road ended in a clearing. No campsites, no stream, just the mountains, the moon, and us on the wrong mountain. And we all sat there in silence for a moment. Then my daughter broke it with a giggle, and she said, "Nice job, Dad. You drove us up onto the wrong mountain." Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever had a moment in life where you feel like you're doing all the right things, making all the right turns, but you can't seem to get where you feel like you should be? Maybe you're here this morning because you feel like you're really, really close and you're on your way, yet you feel like maybe I'm just on the wrong street. Or maybe you came here today because you've exhausted all other options and you are thinking, I know where I want to be, but I don't know how to get there. I feel like I'm spinning my wheels and I'm not going, say it with me, anywhere. Have you ever felt like you were made for something more? Today, I want to talk about one of those turns in life that if we miss this turn, nothing else we do will matter. But if we get this part right, I believe you and I can experience the made for more life that we were created for. If you were here last week, you might remember that I introduced us to an incredibly important city in the ancient world, Corinth. Now, Corinth bustled with activity. It was known for commerce and for trade. All of the most important and talented people were moving to Corinth to be a part of this economic boom, economic growth that was happening in the city. It was a wild city that did wild things, but it was also one of the home bases for the philosophy of, remember last week, cynicism. Now, before prepping for this series, I had no idea that cynicism was an actual tried and true school of philosophical thought. So I asked ChatGPT, and sure enough, it was developed by this man named Diogenes, who said what we need to do as people is reject all things, reject all politics, all people, all opinions, get rid of all ethics and all morals. And if you boil this philosophy down, you get this. All you need in life is me. His idea was that total autonomy equaled total freedom, and that is what would bring happiness in our life. It was all about us. And we can look back at what Diogneses taught, and we can then say, oh yeah, I see that today in our modern culture. Because here's what modern cynicism would say. Yes, I have a low trust of institutions. I have a low trust of people. I find people to be untrustworthy. Cynicism today says, I figured out the problem with the world today, and you know what that problem is? The problem is those people. The problem is them. The problem in this world is the Democrats. The problem in this world are the Republicans. The real problem is those who don't vote and think they can have an opinion on how things go. You know what the problem is? The problem is those religious people. They just want to control everybody. The problem is with the non-religious people. They have no moral center. You want to know what the problem is? It's with the rich people because of what they take. Oh no, the problem is with the poor people because of what they take. You see, there is a problem in the world, and the problem is this: them and those people. So what do? Well, I remove myself from them and I just worry about me. I don't need their religion. I don't need their politics. I don't need their opinions. What I need is me. My status is what I say about me and what I can get you to say about me. And as my status grows, I don't have to pay attention to what they tell me to do. As my status grows, so does my autonomy. And the more autonomous I become, supposedly the more happy I will be. And I understand that way of thinking because I catch myself thinking that way. And here's the truth. We think that way whether we intend to think that way or not. But before we go any further, can I ask the question, does that line of thinking work? Does that philosophy produce the fruit of the Spirit? Here's what I mean with this question. Once you're done arguing your point and proving your worth by disproving someone else's value, once you've shown that they are wrong and therefore you are right, let me put it this way. Once you've made the social media post that you think proves to everyone that you think better, you vote better, you vacation better, you have a better family, you serve better, you save better, you spend better. Once you do that, once you have proved that you are better than those people, that you are better than them, do you feel any better? Or do you find yourself hungry for the next opportunity to prove your worth? Do you ever find yourself at the top of a mountain, going around and hoping that the next turn will be the one that feels like it's enough, and yet it never is? Do you feel like you were made for something more? Well, the citizens of Corinth absolutely knew this, because although they had built this great and grand city and had all this economic growth, something was still missing. In 50 AD, a man known as Apostle Paul came to the city of Corinth and taught them a philosophy that was completely different from their philosophy of cynicism. He taught the Corinthians that you don't have to prove your worth by devaluing someone else, that they don't have to be wrong in order for you to be right. In fact, Paul taught that your value is not dependent on what you produce or what you create. He taught them the idea that their value was inherent. It came from the God who created them in His image. Paul then taught them the story of Jesus, who lived and died and was resurrected before they ever knew who Jesus was, so that they could come down from the mountain of cynicism and experience new life in Christ today. And guess what? They ate this up because their souls were hungry for that kind of truth. And although it was a wild and crazy city, a church was then planted in one of the least likely places in the entire world by some of the most talented people in the entire world. Now, Paul plants this church in Corinth. He then leaves to go plant other churches, right? And a couple years later, he started to hear some stories about how it was going in Corinth. And the rumor was that they were able to do really impressive things. They had some really talented and gifted people leading that church that he planted. But there were also some stories going around that said that the church in Corinth was messed up. It might be actually heading in the wrong direction. Because the rumor was that they were also dividing themselves, fighting that was happening in church. They went back to separating people by class and by money. They argued over which parts of Scripture to use and which parts of Scriptures to not use. Somehow, they had stepped into a new life and brought their old way of habits back with them. So Paul wrote a letter to them that you and I would call 1 Corinthians. It's found in the New Testament of the Bible. And in this, Paul says, I see that you've done a lot of great things. I see that you're really talented, but somewhere on this journey, and I'm paraphrasing, you missed a turn. And he shares with them what that is. Do you want to know what it is? I'm glad you asked. I figured you're here today for some reason, right? So here we go. Paul said that the thing that was missing from the church in Corinth was love. Now, it might sound really simple and really basic, maybe even obvious, but I would caution you to be careful with this. Why? Because I would imagine that there are as many definitions of this word love as there are people who are watching this both online and in person. Love. It's a simple word. Yet at the same time, it's so powerful and it is so blasted complex. Whenever you see this word, especially in the Bible, I encourage you to not gloss over it, because when you and I hear the word love, we most often think of it as an emotion. We liken it to emotion like when we fall in and fall out of love. It's a goal that we long for, to be in love. If someone could make me feel loved and I could in turn make them feel loved. We oftentimes think of that word love as something that we feel. But I want you to notice that Paul's definition of love in 1 Corinthians is notably different from something that we fall in and out of. In 1 Corinthians 13, starting in verse 4, Paul says, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it's not self-seeking, it's not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Now, this letter was originally written in Greek. And in Greek language, there's about 5 different words that we often translate to the word love. The word used here is the word agape. Can you say that together with me? Let's say agape together. Here we go, agape. Now, I'm going to get really nerdy on you for a second. Agape is known as the most pure and divine form of love, not an emotion that we fall in and out of. But it's a type of love that is a decision that we make, a decision to be willing to sacrifice oneself for the sake of someone else. This is why we often read this passage at weddings, because at a wedding, we get to see this take place. Yesterday, I did a wedding, and I read this passage. The bride and the groom looked into each other's eyes, and they entered a covenant with one another to say, from this point forward, my life is in service to you. As the person across from them made that same commitment to say, from this point forward, I will do everything in my ability to be patient and to be kind, to not envy, to be boastful or proud, to not keep a record of wrongs or be easily angered. I'm now here for you, regardless of my emotions. This form of agape love is intense, it's powerful, but it's also a choice. And I can tell you a time in my life when I learned the power of this kind of love, the depth of this love. It was 2014 when our third child, Anderson, was born. Now, he just started middle school this week, so I'm a little bit emotional, a little bit raw talking about him. I'm going to keep my eyes on you, focused on you. Now, you might be thinking that I truly knew what love is when I saw Anderson take his first breath, but that wasn't it. You might think it was when I held him for the first time or when I laid him in his crib for the very first time, but that was not it. No, I truly knew the depth of agape love when Anderson started screaming. And Anderson kept screaming and he wouldn't stop screaming. And most of the time his screaming took place between midnight and 5 a.m. It was maddening, people. Anderson had what doctors like to call colic. And if you're not familiar with the term colic, let me be the one to tell you what it is. It is the most useless term in all of medicine. If you don't believe me, let me read you the Johns Hopkins medicine definition of the term colic. This is what it says. John Hopkins medicine. Colic is when a healthy baby cries for a very long time for no obvious reason. Thanks, doctors. I wasn't sure what I was dealing with. I mean, when a doctor tells you that your baby has colic, it is equivalent of you walking into the ER with a broken arm and the doctor going, "Ooh, boy, that looks like it hurts. Why don't you try to get some rest?" Colic is terrible because there's nothing you can do about it. Well, word got out that our son had colic, and both sets of grandparents would come over one at a time, and they would pick up Anderson, and they would do their tricks. They would coddle and cuddle, and they would swing, and they would sing, and Anderson would just scream at them. And then they would go, "Oh, he's a vocal one." And then they would leave. It was crazy. And look, I'm the father in the story, not the nursing mother. Nicole had it worse than I did. But if you've been there, you know it was absolutely maddening. I remember thinking, we are giving him everything. We are giving Anderson our time, energy. We're giving him our money, our sleep, our sanity, and the only thing Anderson would give us in return is eye contact as he screamed at us. It was at this time I remember realizing, like a divine revelation, oh, this is what love is. I'm giving everything of myself to him, and he is literally incapable of giving anything in return. My job in this moment is not to be filled with warm, fuzzy feelings. They weren't there, believe me. No, instead, my job in that moment was to make a choice, to be patient and to not envy quieter babies and not to be boastful or proud. Not that there was anything to boast or be proud of in those first 8 months of Anderson's life. I had a choice to not be easily angered and to not keep a record of wrongs because, in all honesty, he didn't know what he was doing. No, my job in that season was to protect him, to trust that he probably was screaming because he had a stomachache, to hope that he would get a relief from the discomfort soon, to persevere, remembering that this too is only just a season and that this too shall pass. That's the love Paul is using. And Paul told the church in Corinth, your wrong turn was this. In all you've done and in all you've built, you have left behind love. And in doing so, you left behind Jesus. Because you see, God's greatest attribute is love. So much so that God is love. Jesus is the physical embodiment of God. So Jesus is the physical embodiment of love itself. I mean, you can test me on this if you want. The math checks out. You're not going to win this argument. You can exchange the word Jesus for love throughout all of 1 Corinthians 13 and see that those passages would remain true. For instance, what you'll find is that Jesus is patient. Jesus is kind with people like you and people like me, people who continue to run back to the sin that we swore off years ago. But Jesus is patient and he's kind. As his disciple Peter said, he is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. Jesus doesn't envy or boast. Jesus isn't proud, although he could be if you think about it. He's the King of Kings of all people, but as Paul told the Philippians, who, being in the very nature of God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant and being made in human kindness. And being found in appearance as man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Jesus is not easily angered. Doesn't keep a record of wrongs. For when he hung on the cross, being executed by the very men that he created, he prayed for his executioners, saying this, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Jesus also protects. Jesus always trusts. Jesus always hopes. Jesus always perseveres. And this truth undergirds all of the Christian faith. And if we miss this part, we miss everything. Do you know the 3 verses that are right before Paul's definition of love in 1 Corinthians? Those 3 verses might just be the 3 scariest verses of all the Bible, at least for me. Because Paul has taken 12 chapters to say, Corinth, I see you and I see what you've done. I see your skills. I see your effort. And it's all awesome what you have done. But if you miss this part, you all miss everything. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13, starting in verse 1, he says, if I speak in tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I might boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. You can imagine that if Paul was standing right here with me today, we'd ask him this. Are you saying I can build a life and a good business and a good home and a good family? I could care for other people. I could be nice to my neighbors and be charitable to my community. And I can do all of that and still miss the life that God has created for me? Yes. Can I make this personal, Central? I have to ask Paul this. Are you saying that I could go to an awesome church that is known throughout Chippewa Falls and the surrounding communities? I could be a part of a church that serves at Agnes's table. I could participate in the Dollar Club once a month. Are you saying I could be a good church goer and still miss the made for more life that God has created for me? Paul would say, yes. This passage terrifies me because I know my tendency to want to build a life out of my own strength. Church, we can do great, wonderful, and super cool things, and we never need Jesus to be a part of it. But in doing so, what we will do is we will wind up at the top of a mountain, just going around and around and around and thinking, I thought I was following all the right directions. I thought I was doing what I was supposed to do. So why is none of this leading me to the fulfillment that I thought I was created for? It will be because that we have built our families, our business, our relationships, and we can even build our faith out of our own strength and what we can do rather than what Jesus has done for us. Did you catch that? See, the problem in Corinth was that they built a city out of their own strength, and it left them longing for something more. So then they built a church out of their own strength, and it left them longing for something more. And their city and their church were filled with division and filled with arguing and the lack of fulfillment that the gospel has promised. If you and I want to be followers of Jesus, we must wake up every day and ask Jesus to please reveal to us the areas of our lives that we continue to build out of our own strength, because we know they will lead us to mountains that go nowhere. I mean, I see this in my own life. We see it in our own lives. When we don't have Jesus at the center, we are left guessing, is this the right way to do that? Without Jesus at the center, we do the same thing in our places of work. Think about it. I mean, you're all tuning in. You're at church right now. We're all in our church clothes, but at some point we leave our church clothes and we step back into our business clothes. And today we're here celebrating Jesus' kingdom, but tomorrow we get back to building our own kingdoms, right? And listen, if that's you, I get it, because I too have this impulse as well. So let me ask you from my own experience. Once you've made it, once you've made that sale or landed that client, once you've hit the numbers, if you're a student watching today, once you've passed the test and graduated the school, do you feel like you've actually achieved anything, or are you simply hungry for something more? Without Jesus at the center, we do the same thing in our faith. We build our faith out of our own strength, and instead of becoming more like Jesus, we ask Jesus to be a little bit more like us. And it feels good to have Jesus be an influencer in our lives, but being Lord over every area just feels like too much to ask. So we create a faith that is always encouraging and rarely challenging. And even after doing all of these faithful things, we feel like we're missing something. We feel like we're stuck on a mountain, unable to get to the place that we're trying to be. And hear me clearly right now. I'm not saying you, I'm saying we. The problem is not them, it's all of us. It's me too, because we have all sinned and we all fall short of the glory of God. We all long for something that we cannot achieve on our own. If we could, we would have it already, but we can't. So let's use the litmus test of 1 Corinthians 13 for ourselves. Let's be honest. Are you patient? Are you always kind? Are you never envious or proud or boastful? Do you ever struggle with anger or holding on to grudges? Of course you fail at that. So do I, because we long for the thing we cannot achieve on our own. And the good news is that we have been invited to a life of more. The question is what do we do? What do we do when we find ourselves at the top of a mountain and we don't know where to go? Well, what did I do? What does anybody do when they're lost? If you know that you're heading in the wrong direction, then the first thing that you do is you stop. If you know you're heading in the wrong direction, it's foolish to continue to head in that wrong direction. The second thing that I did, I asked for directions, which is difficult to do because it means that you have to admit that you don't know where you are and you don't know how to get to where you want to go. And then what's the third thing that I did? I started heading in the right direction. That might seem obvious, but directions are only useful when we actually use those directions. So what does that look like? Well, at the end of the day, it looks like this. It means that in every area of our life, we simply start with Jesus. That might seem simplistic, but I think it's true. It is that simple. It is that beautiful, and it is that difficult. And I want to be upfront with you. If you decide that I'm done with this mountain, I'm ready to start with Jesus, at the beginning it will feel difficult to say, I'm going to work every relationship from this point forward starting with Jesus. That's hard. It might change how you approach your business if you say, I'm going to start with Jesus. It might change your experience with faith if you say, I'm going to start my faith with Jesus. But when you do, we get to experience the life that you and I were created for. We get to begin to look at everything in our life from the lens of the gospel, from the patient and kind love of the gospel of Jesus. And here's the truth. This world of ours, this world that you and I are living in, it's a difficult thing to do by yourself. But the good news is, no one's asking you to do this by yourself. This is why we here at Central hope that you join a small group. Not to take up more time during your week, but I want you to be around other like-minded people who are saying, I might not be perfect at it, but I'm going to do everything within my power to survey my life. And in every corner of my life, I'm going to start with, say it with me, Jesus. And I'm going to surround myself with other people who are doing the same. So at least once a week, you can be around people who are encouraging each other and praying with each other and challenging each other and saying, we too can start with Jesus and begin looking at everything in our life through the gospel lens of Jesus, through his patient and his kind gospel. And if you begin starting with Jesus and looking at every area of your life through the lens of Jesus, it will change everything. Paul's goal for all of 1 Corinthians was that we would see everything through this lens. Not that we would look at Jesus through our tradition or through our politics. Not that we look at Jesus through our perspective, but that we would look at our traditions and our politics and our perspectives through the lens of Jesus. And if you begin putting on the lens of Jesus, what it might clarify is that some of us have been on the wrong mountain for a really, really long time. But remember, the gospel of Jesus doesn't lead us to shame. No, it leads us down that mountain and to a better mountain. Or better yet, Jesus leads us not to a mountain, but to a hill called Calvary, where Jesus himself hung on a cross in the greatest display of love the world had ever seen. And out of his patience and kindness, he offered you and he offered me a way off that mountain into the base of his perfect love. So maybe today, before we go out and try to build another kingdom for ourselves, maybe today is the day that you say, you know what? I'm ready to be done with this mountain. I'm ready to start with Jesus in every area of my life because I don't want to miss this turn. God's grace, God's peace, and God's love be with all of you and all of God's children said, amen.